My name is Rebecca Ellison. I'm 41 years old. And the night I finally stayed home for the holidays alone, at my own table, I understood something I'd spent 30 years refusing to see. The folding chair was never a shortage of seats. It was a decision. It just took me most of my life to find out whose and why. Go grab a chair from the garage, Becca. There's not enough room, my mother would say, smiling, while my brother Grant sank into the tall chair with the padded arms. I was 9 the first time. 7 of us at that table, 6 real chairs, and the one that folded, cold metal, rocking on the uneven floor, was always the one they handed me. I set it up myself. I folded it back up myself. I carried it out to the cold myself. For most of my life, I believed I had earned that chair. That I was too much, too sensitive, too difficult, that if I were only easier to love, they would have made room. I counted the chairs at every holiday for 31 years, hoping one of the real ones would finally be mine. This is the story of the exact moment I stopped counting. It begins the way everything in my family began, with my grandmother. The house I grew up in sat at the end of Larchmont Drive, and everyone on the street agreed it was the pretty one. White shutters my father repainted every second spring. A lawn he edged on Saturdays into straight, disciplined lines. In the front window, my mother kept a lamp on a timer, so the house glowed a warm gold at dusk, whether anyone was home or not. People slowed their cars when they drove past. That was the point of it. From the outside, you understand, the house looked like glass clean, bright, nothing to hide. But glass is a strange thing. Stand in the wrong place, and it stops being a window and becomes a mirror. It shows you your own face instead of what's behind it. My whole childhood, people looked at our house and saw their own idea of a family, and never once saw the 2 children inside it being raised in completely different weather. Because there were 2 of us, and we did not get the same childhood. My brother Grant was 3 years older, and he was the son that house was built to face. And here is the thing I need you to understand early, because it is the thing that took me longest to learn. My mother was not a cold woman. That would have been easier. A cold woman you can simply grieve and walk away from. No, my mother was capable of enormous warmth. I watched her give it all my life. I watched her laugh, her rolling, generous laugh with the neighbors on the porch. I watched her cup Grant's face in both hands when he came home from a bad day and say, "My sweet boy, my sweet, sweet boy," until the sadness went out of him. She had a whole ocean of tenderness in her. I simply lived on the one coast of her it never reached. When Grant spilled his milk, it was because he was excited. When I spilled mine, it was because I was careless. When Grant forgot a chore, she did it herself, humming. When I forgot one, it became a conversation about the kind of person I was turning into. Nobody ever wrote these rules down. Nobody had to. I learned to read that house the way sailors learn to read a sky, by the sound of the front door, whether it was safe to come out or better to disappear before it opened. There was one warm room in all of it, and her name was Nana. Nana was my mother's mother, and she lived with us. And she was the one person under that gold roof who looked at me and seemed simply, uncomplicatedly glad. She had flour on her cardigan more often than not, and butterscotch candies in the pocket of it, the ones in the gold wrappers, and when the grown-ups got loud, she would press one into my hand under the table without ever looking at me, so it stayed a secret just between us. She used to draw her chair back 6 inches when I came into the kitchen and pat the wood beside her and say, "Sit up here by me, love. There's always room." She said it the way you'd say a true thing about the world. I believed her the way you believe the sun will come up. I want to tell you about something I saw once, when I was small, that I did not understand for 30 years. I was sitting in Nana's lap at the kitchen table, and she was doing the thing she did, tucking a curl behind my ear, telling me I had good eyes, that I saw what other people missed. And my mother was at the sink with her back to us. She turned around to say something, and she saw us. And her face did a thing I had no word for then. It wasn't anger. It was worse than anger. It was a kind of ache, quickly covered, the look of a person standing outside a lit window in the cold. She turned back to the sink, and in a bright, flat voice she said, "Mother, don't fill her head. That was all." I didn't understand then that a woman can watch her own mother pour warmth into a grandchild and feel something break quietly loose inside her, that you can stand in your own kitchen and be jealous of your own daughter for being handed the softness you spent your entire childhood waiting for and never once received. I only understood that the temperature in the room had dropped and that somehow it was to do with me. Nana was a wonderful grandmother. I have wondered since whether she was a wonderful mother. I think those are not always the same woman. The autumn I turned 9, Nana got sick, and it was fast, the way it sometimes is. She went from flour on her cardigan to a hospital bed in the front room where the timer lamp used to sit. And it was there, a week before she died, that she gave me the doll. She was very small by then, swallowed up in that bed, her hands gone light as paper. But she waited until we were alone, and she drew it out from under the blanket, a cloth doll with black button eyes and a little dress she had sewn herself from the leftover calico of her own apron, so that the doll and my grandmother matched. "Her name is whatever you decide," she whispered. "She's for holding when I can't. When the house gets loud, you hold her, and you tell her the things you would have told me. There's always room for you, love. Even when it doesn't feel like it. Especially then. I was 9. I did not know I was being handed a goodbye. I named the doll Sunday because Sundays were the days I'd got to sit beside her. 6 days later, we buried her. I carried Sunday to the funeral tucked inside my coat, over my heart, where no one could see. And then came Thanksgiving. I still believed the chair would be mine. That's the part you have to understand, before anything else. I was not a child bracing for a blow, I was a child times hoping. All that week I had slept inside Nana's cardigan because the wool still held the smell of her, and I had carried one small, warm, secret certainty, the way you carry a coal, cupped in both hands to keep it from going out. Her chair would come to me now. The tall one at my father's right hand, the one with the arms, because it had always been ours. Because she used to pat the seat and say, "There's always room." In my 9-year-old heart, it was already mine, the last warm thing she had left me. So, on Thanksgiving, I went to the table before anyone called me, and I stood behind that chair, and I laid both hands flat on the back of it, on wood worn smooth by 100 of her Sundays, and I waited. And I was smiling. God help me, I was smiling because I thought this was the part of the story where somebody finally notices the small girl in the corner and is gentle with her. My mother came in drying her hands, counting heads the way she counted everything, and her eyes moved down the table 1, 2, 3, and passed over me the way light passes over a thing it has no reason to rest on. "Becca, don't stand there, sweetheart. Go pull a chair in from the garage, there isn't the room." Already turning away. "Grant, take Nana's seat, honey. You've got the legs for it." And something in me, for the first and almost the last time in my childhood, broke open. "That's Nana's chair," I said, and my voice came out too loud. It frightened me, the sound of it. She said I could sit there. She said there's always room. Why does Grant get it? Why is there room for everybody but me? For one moment, the whole table went still. And in that stillness, I felt something I would spend 30 years trying to unfeel. I felt like a times problem, not a child who had been wronged. A problem. A disturbance in a nice room. My mother knelt down to my level. And for 1 second, I've gone back to this second 1,000 times. Something moved behind her eyes. Something that was almost sorry. Her hand came up toward my face, and I swear to you it hovered there, an inch from my cheek, the way a hand hovers over a wound it might tend. And then it landed in my hair instead, smoothing it back, tidying me, and whatever had opened in her closed, and in that gentle, terrible voice a family keeps for teaching a child her place, she said, "Rebecca, your grandmother just died? Do you think you're the only one who's hurting?" And her voice caught, just slightly, on the word times hurting, and I did not understand, until I was much older, that she was not only talking about me. I need you to be my big girl right now. I need you to understand. Don't make this about you. Do you know what that does to a 9-year-old? I had come to that table carrying the freshest grief of my small life, and instead of comfort, I was handed a job everyone else's feelings to carry on top of my own. My father read the back of the cranberry can as though it held the news of the world and never once looked up. My uncle laughed at something my aunt hadn't finished saying. My cousin Denise met my eyes for exactly as long as it takes a child to decide a thing is not her problem, and then found her fork very interesting. There was room at that table for every living person's pain except the child's, and the child was being taught that even times noticing times, this was selfish. So I swallowed it. I took the scream that was rising in me, the true, clean, righteous scream of a wronged little girl, and I folded it up small, the way I would later learn to fold the chair, and I hid it somewhere inside me where it would go on quietly bleeding for 30 years. "Okay," I said. "I understand." I was 9 years old. I had just grown up, and it had cost me the last of my childhood to do it. I did not cry at the table. I asked to be excused, and I walked to the bathroom at the end of the hall, and I locked the door, and I sat on the cold edge of the tub with Sunday pressed hard against my mouth so the sound would not carry, and I wept until my whole body shook. 9 years old, teaching myself that grief was a thing you did in a locked room, alone, silently, so that it would not inconvenience the very people who had caused it. When I came out, I had washed my face and arranged it into something calm, and my mother looked up and said, "See? That's my good girl." She never once asked what I had been doing in there. A child who cries where no one can see her has finally become convenient. After that, Sunday became the only one I was allowed to tell. A child that age has to give her heart to someone. She has too much feeling and too few words, and it has to go somewhere, or it turns to poison inside her. Mine went to a rag doll, because there was no one left in that house who would hold still and listen without telling me I was too much. Every hurt I swallowed at that table, I carried down the hall and let out in the dark, under the blanket, in a whisper, so the house would never hear. I could tell you 100 of those nights. Let me tell you one. Sunday, I'd whisper, "Tonight, Mom made the ribeye. The one Grant loves, you know the one? She does it in the pan with the butter, and the whole house fills up with it, pepper and something sweet, and your mouth goes all watery just from the hallway. She only made the one, because it's the expensive kind, and Grant's been sick, so he needs it to build his strength back. And I'm the healthy one. So I have to let him have it. That's only fair, Sunday. That's only fair." But I did ask. I want you to know, I asked nicely. I said, "Mom, could I just try a little? Just a taste. Not a piece, just a taste. The size of that little silver spoon Nana used to stir her tea with. You remember the one. Just that much." And she said there wasn't enough, and that I should think about my brother. So I said, "Okay." I always say, "Okay." It smelled so good, though, Sunday. It smelled so good. But it's all right. Don't be sad. Don't be sad. I've decided something. When I'm big, when I'm all grown up and I have my own kitchen, I'm going to make that ribeye myself. A great big one. Just for me. And I'm going to eat it until I can't eat one more bite, and nobody will be sick, and nobody will need it more than me. Won't that be something? You can have some too. I promise. There'll be so much of it, it'll be silly. There'll be enough for everybody. Okay. It's late now. We have to sleep. Come here. You have to sleep well tonight. Do you hear me? Don't kick the blanket off, and don't drool on the pillow, or you'll catch a chill, and then who'll look after you? There. That's my good girl. That's my good girl. Good night. Sunday. I love you. I love you the most. And then I would draw the blanket up under her chin with a tenderness I could not find anywhere in that house pointed at me, and I would fall asleep holding her, a 9-year-old girl, mothering a doll with all the softness, all the patience, all the times. There is enough for you. There is room for you that not one living person in my family ever once spent on her. I gave Sunday the childhood I was being asked, quietly, nightly, to hand over. There is one more thing about those nights, and I did not learn it until I was grown. One of them I will never know which my mother saw. I woke, once, to the hallway light falling across my blanket, and my mother standing in the doorway. She was looking at me holding that doll, and her face, in the half-dark, was doing the thing it had done at the kitchen sink all those years before, that ache, that look of someone at a window in the cold. Her hand was on the doorframe, and for a long moment she did not move, and I lay very still with my eyes half shut, and I thought I let myself think time she's going to come in. She's going to sit on the edge of the bed. She's going to be my mother now. And something in her leaned toward the room. I felt it. I did not imagine it. And then she pulled the door quietly shut, and the light went, and I was alone with Sunday in the dark. I have spent my whole life not knowing what that was. Whether she couldn't, whether some door in her had been shut so long by her own mother that she'd forgotten it could open. All I know is that she stood at the threshold of loving me once, that I saw her stand there, and that she chose the hallway. Which is why what happened at Christmas broke something in me that has never fully healed. My cousin Denise wanted the doll. She was 11 and used to being handed whatever she reached for, and she lifted Sunday off my bed and said she'd only hold her a minute, and I let her, because I had already been trained to give the things I loved away with a smile. When I finally asked for her back, Denise had grown bored, and somewhere in that careless handling, the seam Nana had sewn from her own apron had torn open, and the stuffing had come loose, and one black button eye hung down by a single thread. I started to cry, and my aunt sighed, "For heaven's sake, it's a rag doll." And my mother said, "Becca, don't make a scene over a toy. Think how that makes Denise feel. Think of Denise. Think of everyone, always, before me. And someone I never learned who decided the broken thing was garbage." And Sunday went into the kitchen bin, down under the potato peelings and the torn wrapping paper. While I was made to say it was fine, I didn't mind. I found her that night. After the whole house was asleep, I crept down and dug through the cold trash with my bare hands, and I lifted her out ruined, reeking of orange rind, one eye gone. And I held her the way Nana had taught me to hold her when the house got loud. And I understood, at 9 years old, with a clarity that has never once left me, the truest rule of my family, that the things I loved could be taken from me and broken and thrown away, and that if I grieved them out loud, I, times, would be the one who had done something wrong. I had one other warm room left after that. A girl named Lily, 2 doors down, a gap in her teeth, and a mother who hugged her children in the driveway where the whole street could see. Lily was the one person I could still tell things to out loud. And when my mother learned how much I had said that I had told an outsider that our perfect house was not perfect, she did not shout. She simply decided that Lily was a bad influence, that I came home too worked up whenever I'd been with her. And slowly, the way she did everything, she made the friendship impossible. Playdates fell through. Rides never came. Eventually, Lily stopped knocking. It would take me years to understand what my mother had understood at a glance. A lonely child is so much easier to keep than a child with a witness. So that was the wound, and it never bruised, and there was nothing to show a teacher. Just a little girl in a cold metal chair, in a warm gold house, holding a one-eyed doll in the dark, learning the first rule of the rest of her life. You sit where they put you, and you don't make it a thing. 31 years is a long time to carry a chair. Nobody warns you that you do not grow out of the role. You grow into it. You get taller, you get a job, you get a mortgage and a marriage, and a face you can hold steady in a crowd. And underneath all of it, at every holiday, you are still 9 years old, walking out to a cold garage to fetch your own small seat, telling yourself, it's fine. Let me tell you about the year I understood the cycle was not going to end on its own. Maya was 4. She was my whole heart, walking around outside my body in a little velvet holiday dress. And I had gone out to the garage for the chair, the same chair, I swear to you, the very same one. The duct tape gone gray and curling now, and I turned around with it in my hands, and my daughter was standing in the doorway, watching her mother lift a cold metal chair down off a stack behind the lawnmower. And she tipped her head and said, "Mommy, is that your special chair?" Special. She thought it was special. She thought it was mine the way a crown is yours. And I stood there in the cold with that chair in my hands, and I felt something I had not felt in 30 years of carrying it. Not for myself. I had long since given up the right to feel things for myself. I felt it for her, because I understood, standing in that doorway, exactly how it happens. This is how it happens. Nobody sits a child down and tells her she is the one who matters less. They just let her watch her mother fetch the folding chair, year after year, with a smile, until one day someone hands the child a folding chair of her own, and she takes it, smiling, because she has learned that this is simply what love asks of the women in her family. I looked at my 4-year-old calling that cold thing special, and something in me said, very quietly, in a voice I almost didn't recognize as my own, not her. Whatever it costs. Not her. But I wasn't ready yet. That is the part that is hard to confess. I saw it, and I still carried the chair in, and I still sat in it. Seeing a thing and being able to walk away from it are separated by a distance that took me 3 more years and every ounce of strength I had to cross. Because I was a grown woman, and I still had a one-eyed doll in a box in my closet, I never told anyone. Not Daniel, not for years. But on the nights before a holiday, the nights when the dread would start in my chest and my body would begin bracing for a house 200 miles away, I would wait until my own house was asleep, and I would take Sunday out of her box, and I would hold her, a grown woman, holding a rag doll in the dark. And I would feel 9 again, and I would let myself, for 1 minute, be the child no one had comforted. I had spent my whole life being the one who soothed everyone else. That doll was the only thing that had ever soothed me, even if I'd had to do it in her voice, even if I'd had to be my own mother by proxy, through a one-eyed doll since I was 9 years old. If that sentence hurts to hear, I promise you it hurt more to live. And still, this is the thing I can hardly bear to tell you still. I kept trying to earn the seat. When my mother had her knee replaced, I took 2 weeks off work. I had a newborn. I want you to hold that. I had a 2-month-old baby at home, and I drove the 200 miles, and I slept on the couch in that house, the same couch, in earshot of the same dining room, and I got up 3 times a night with my own child, and then up again at 6 to drive my mother to her appointments. And I did it gladly. That is the part that still catches in my throat. I did it gladly because some animal part of me, some 9-year-old, still folded up small inside my chest, was thinking, maybe this is the thing that finally makes them see me. Maybe if I am good enough and useful enough and I ask for nothing at all, one of them will look up and say, "Becca, come here, sit up by me." I was in the waiting room with the baby asleep on my chest when I heard my mother, through the half-open door, tell the physical therapist that it was such a shame Grant was too busy to help, but that at least Becca didn't have much going on. I didn't cry there. Of course I didn't. I had been trained since I was 9 not to cry where anyone could see. I carried my sleeping baby into the hospital bathroom the way I'd carried Sunday down that hallway 30 years before, and I locked the door. And I stood there with my daughter's breath warm against my neck, and I wept into her soft hair so quietly that she never even stirred. 38 years old, and still crying in a locked room so as not to inconvenience the people who had made me cry. Some things you carry so long you forget you are carrying them. You think it is just the shape of your own hands. And then there was the ribeye. It's small. It undid me. That same visit, the night before her surgery, my mother made dinner for the 3 of us. She made a ribeye. 1 ribeye, in the pan, in butter, and the smell of it walked straight through 30 years and took me by the throat. She cut it in half. She gave 1/2 to my father, and she kept 1/2 for herself. And she ladled me a bowl of the soup that had been sitting on the stove since lunch, and she never thought a thing of it, because in that house it had genuinely never crossed anyone's mind that I might be someone you would save a piece for. And here is what I need you to understand, because it is the whole of it. I don't believe she was being cruel. I think that is worse. Cruelty at least requires you to remember the person exists. She simply did not think of me at all. I was 38, and I had driven 200 miles with a newborn, and I sat there and ate my soup and said it was delicious, while somewhere in my chest, a 9-year-old girl whispered to a doll that it was fine, it was only fair. She wasn't the one who mattered. The first person who ever thought to save me something was Daniel. It was the year Maya turned 2. I'd hosted the holiday in my own house, at a table with 6 chairs I had bought to match on purpose, though I would not let myself know why, and I had still, somehow, ended up eating half my dinner, standing at the kitchen island, because I had given my own seat away before anyone even asked. Old Messel. You don't feel it move. We were driving home, the baby asleep in her car seat, and I was doing the thing I always did, which was defending them. Mom's just tired. It's a lot to host. Grant really is busy, and Daniel reached across the dark and put his hand over mine on my knee, and he said, very quietly, his eyes on the road, "Becca, you gave your own chair away tonight, in your own house, and you didn't even notice you did it. You've been doing it your whole life. And I need you to hear me say this once, so that somewhere in you it's on the record. It was never that there wasn't enough room. It was that they taught a little girl her comfort came last, and she believed them because she was little and she loved them, and children believe the people they love. And I, who had not cried in front of another living soul since I was 9 years old, put my hand over my mouth, and I broke. In the dark, in the car, with our daughter sleeping behind us, 30 years of it came up out of me at once, ugly and silent and shaking, and Daniel didn't say another word. He just held my hand and drove, and let me be, for once in my life, the one who was comforted instead of the one doing the comforting. He couldn't lift it off me. That's not how it works. Someone who loves you can open the door, but they cannot carry you through it. But a door, once it's open, lets in a draft. And I started for the first time in my life to feel the cold I'd been sitting in. That was the winter I started counting the chairs differently. That was the winter I first let myself notice the seventh one. In my father's study, behind the door that was always left half closed, there was a chair. It matched the dining set, exactly the same dark oak, the same ribbon of carved leaves across the back. It had been part of the original set of 8, Nana's spare, and after she died, it had drifted in there and become the chair my father draped his jackets over. For 31 years, it had sat 6 feet from the dining room, holding a windbreaker and a stack of car magazines, while I went out to a freezing garage for a folding chair with duct tape on its leg. 6 good chairs at the table. A 7th in the study. And me, the 8th, in cold metal. I don't know why I finally let myself count it. Maybe because Maya was 7 that year and had started asking the kind of questions I had trained myself out of asking. But that Thanksgiving, I walked past the study door and I saw that chair holding my father's jacket, and I did the arithmetic I had refused to do since I was 9. There had always been enough chairs. There had never, not once in 31 years, been a shortage of seats in that house. There had only ever been a decision about which child didn't get one. We sat down to eat, 8 of us, and of course when the count came up short, my mother looked at me, and of course I went out to the garage on autopilot and came back with the cold metal chair and set it up in the low corner where it rocked, and sat down in it at 40 years old with my daughter on my lap. And Maya looked at my chair. Then she looked down the whole length of the table at all the matching ones. And in the clear, carrying voice of a child who has not yet learned which questions she is not allowed to ask, she said, "Mommy, why is your chair different from everybody's? Are you in trouble?" The table went quiet. Not the dramatic kind. A small, held kind. My father found something interesting in the football score. Sharon reached for the rolls, and my mother laughed her warm, rolling company laugh and said, "Oh, sweetheart, your mommy just likes to be difficult." She's always been our sensitive one. She's always been our sensitive one. There it was, the whole architecture of my life, in 6 words, said with a smile, to my daughter, across a table of matching chairs. And I felt the old machine start up in me, the reflex to laugh along and make myself small so the moment could pass. Don't make it about you, Becca. I didn't laugh along. I sat very still. I put my hand flat on the cool oak that had been my grandmother's. I felt Maya's small back rising and falling against my chest. And I thought of a 9-year-old girl standing behind an empty chair with both hands on the back of it, smiling, waiting to be seen. And I was not angry, which surprised me more than anything in the world. I was just finally done. "Mom," I said, and my voice did not shake. "There's a chair in the study." She blinked. "What?" "There's a chair in the study. It matches the set. It's been in there since Nana died, holding Dad's jacket, for 31 years. There was always a 7th chair. You had the room. Every single year you had the room, and every single year you sent me out to the garage. And here my voice did break once, a single fault line, and I let it, and I did not apologize for it. I was 9, Mom. It was a week after we buried her. She used to pull her chair back and tell me there was always room, and the first holiday she was gone, you gave her seat to Grant, and you sent me to the garage. And I have gone every year since. I have baked your pies and paid your flights and slept on your couch after your surgery, and I have never once been allowed to say that it hurt. It hurt when I was 9. It has hurt every year since. Nobody found the football score interesting anymore. Sharon looked at her plate, and Grant looked at me, and for the first time in our whole lives, his face was not certain of anything. He was trying to remember. I watched him reach back through 40 years of holidays for the sister in the corner and come up with almost nothing, because he had never once had to notice her, and I watched it frighten him, the size of what he could not remember. He opened his mouth. Becca, I don't remember it being like, and he stopped, because even he could hear that times I don't remember times was the entire confession. My mother set down her fork. "You are making a scene," she said, over a chair. And I looked at her and I said the only thing I had left, which was the truth. She used to tell me there was always room. And something happened in my mother's face. The company smile went out of it. And for a moment, she was not performing anything at all. She was just an old woman looking at her daughter. And under all of it, I saw that ache again, the one from the kitchen sink, the one from the doorway, 30 years of it. And she said, very quietly, almost to herself, in a voice I had never heard her use. She never said that to me. The table was silent. "Not once," my mother said, looking somewhere past all of us, at a room none of us could see. "Not once in my whole life did that woman pull a chair back for me." And there it was. Not a confession. Not an apology. Something more terrible and more human than either the wound, showing through the wall for exactly 1 second before she could cover it. My whole life, I had thought my mother looked at me and saw a problem. In that moment, I understood she had looked at me and seen my grandmother's arms open for a child, and it had opened a hunger in her so old and so unhealed that she could not be in the same room with it. She had not exiled me to the garage because I was difficult. She had exiled the little girl her own mother had chosen to love. I was 9, and I had been handed the bill for a coldness that started a whole generation before I was born. I could have hated her for it. I had earned the right to, but hate wasn't what rose in me. What rose in me, God help me, was grief for her, for me, for the whole long line of women in that family. Each one made the family scapegoat by the one before her, each handing the same cold chair down to whichever girl had loved the wrong grandmother. My father set down his fork. He looked, for 1 second, as though he might finally speak. And my whole body turned toward that half second, like a plant turning toward a window. Please, I thought, just this once. But he picked his fork back up, and he said, "Can we just have a nice dinner?" And that, too, I would come to understand better than I wanted to, but not yet. Not that night. So I did the only thing left that was mine to do. I stood up. I lifted Maya onto my hip. And I folded the chair. I want you to see this. I folded the cold metal chair the way I had folded it 100 times out of 30 years of muscle memory. And I carried it back through the kitchen and out to the garage. And I stacked it against the wall behind the lawnmower, where it had always lived. And I stood out there for a moment, in the gasoline and old paint smell of my whole childhood. And I understood the deal I had signed at 9, that if I only carried it gracefully enough, 1 year they would see how good I'd been and hand me a real chair. No one else had ever signed that contract. I was the only party to it. I had honored it for 31 years. And then I did the thing I had never done. I kept walking, out the side door, to the car. Daniel came out with our coats and our half-eaten pies without a word, because he had been waiting 31 years for me to walk to that car, and I drove down Larchmont Drive, past the house that glowed gold on a timer, whether anyone was home or not. Maya was quiet in the back. Then she said, "Mommy, am I in trouble?" "No, baby," I said. "You asked a really good question. You've got good eyes." She went quiet again, watching the streetlights slide across the ceiling of the car. And I drove. And for the first time on that road in my whole life, my hands were loose on the wheel, and my shoulders had already come down, and we weren't even to the county line yet. I didn't go back the next year. People need it to be about the chair, because a chair is small and my leaving was large, and the arithmetic only works if I am the unreasonable one. Grant left a voicemail that said I'd hurt Mom after everything they'd done for me. My mother sent a Christmas card that did not apologize, but did list in her looping hand the things she had done for me over the years, the way you'd itemize a bill. I didn't answer any of it. Not out of cruelty. I was just so tired. I had knocked on a door for 31 years, and I finally set my hand down, and the quiet on the other side of that decision was the first real rest of my adult life. No one tells you the truth about walking away, so let me tell you, it is not triumphant. There is no music. Mostly there is grief. I grieved the mother I had spent my whole life hoping she would turn into the one who would come in from the kitchen one year and pull a chair back 6 inches and say, "Sit up here by me, Becca. There's always room." I had to bury that woman. She was never coming. And I let myself cry for her, the way I had cried for Nana at 9, except this time, not in a locked bathroom, not quietly, not so as to spare anyone. This time I let myself be heard. And I grieved for my mother, too, for the girl she had been, standing at her own mother's cold sink, waiting for a warmth that went instead to me. I understand her now. Understanding her did not make me go back. That is the thing I most need you to know. If you take nothing else, you are allowed to understand someone all the way down to the root of them, to forgive them even, and still never once hand them the folding chair of your one and only life again. Forgiveness is something you can do from across a great distance. It does not require you to sit back down at the table. It was my father, in the end, who undid me a year after I'd stopped going, from 6 feet away and 30 years too late. I was telling Daniel the whole story one night, the chair, all of it, and I got to the winter I was maybe 12, when the folding chair had suddenly, mysteriously, stopped rocking. I'd assumed, as a child, that I had simply learned at last to sit still enough. But as I said it out loud at 41, I remembered something I had never let myself look at, that I had crawled under the table once, that winter, to see, and found a little wedge of cardboard, folded many times over, jammed tight under the short leg. Someone had measured it. Someone had gotten down on the floor of that dining room and fitted it and said nothing. And I knew, the way you suddenly know a thing you have always known, that it was my father. That while my mother sent me to the cold, my father, who never once, in his whole life, found the courage to give me a real chair, who turned the page and reached for the gravy every single year, had gotten down on his knees in secret and wedged a scrap of cardboard under my chair so that it would not rock. That was the entire size of his love for me. That was everything he had. A folded piece of cardboard, given in the dark, where standing up for me out loud would have cost him something he was too frightened to spend. I have never decided whether that is the saddest thing I know, or the kindest, or whether, in a house like that one, they were finally the same thing. I only know I sat on my own kitchen floor and wept for a coward who loved me in the only currency his fear could carry. This past Thanksgiving, I set my own table. 6 chairs matching, solid, and one of them at the head with arms, because I bought it that way on purpose, and I let myself know exactly why. Daniel at the foot. Maya beside me. 2 friends who have quietly become the family I chose instead of the one I was assigned. People who look at me across a table and are simply, plainly, glad I am there. When Maya knocked over her cider reaching for the rolls, one of them just laughed and blotted it up and said the tablecloth had survived worse. And I watched my daughter learn, in real time, that spilling something is not a referendum on whether you deserve your seat. And on the stove that night, in a heavy pan, in butter and pepper and something sweet, I made the ribeye. A great big one. The expensive kind. I bought enough that everyone could have as much as they wanted, and there would still be more left over, because there was a promise I had made a long time ago, in the dark, to someone very small, and I have never in my life kept a promise more carefully. That night, after the others were asleep, I took her down off the shelf where she lives now, one button eye, a seam I stitched myself with clumsy child's fingers, calico from an apron worn by a woman 30 years in the ground. And I sat at my own table, in my own kitchen, that still smelled of butter and pepper, and I did the thing I had not done since I was 9 years old. I held her up, and I whispered, "Sunday, I did it." I made the ribeye a big one, the expensive kind, and I ate until I couldn't eat one more bite, and nobody was sick, and nobody needed it more than me, and there was enough. There was so much of it, it was silly. There was enough for everybody, just like I promised. Just like I said there'd be. My voice went the way it hadn't gone in front of anyone in 30 years. And listen to me. We don't have to be quiet anymore. Do you hear me? We don't have to cry where no one can see us. We don't have to fold ourselves up small so there's room for everyone else. We got out. We built a whole house, and there's room in it, and it's all ours. You can drool on the pillow. You can kick the blanket right off. Nobody's going to send us to the garage ever again. And I sat there in the dark of my own warm kitchen and held that ruined little doll, and I cried, and for the first time in my whole life, the crying did not cost me anything at all. Before dinner that night, Maya had climbed into her chair and looked at the one seat we'd set for a friend running late and asked, "Is there enough room?" And she is my daughter, so of course she is a child who asks that, who wants to be sure there's a place for the ones not yet arrived. And I had heard my grandmother's voice come up out of my own mouth 32 years after I last heard hers, warm and certain, a true thing about the world. "There's always room, love," I said. There's always room. There was no folding chair anywhere in my house. I never bought one. I never will. I don't have a lesson for you. I'm not sure the truest stories come with one. I have a doll on a shelf, and a table with enough chairs, and a smell of butter and pepper that used to hurt and now just smells like home. But if any of this landed too close, if you were the child sent out into the cold to fetch your own seat, the one every family like mine seems to need, the one they call difficult, or dramatic, or too sensitive, the one the books and the therapists have a colder name for, the family scapegoat if you ever comforted yourself in the dark because there was no one else to do it, then let me say the one thing I would climb back through 30 years to tell that little girl on the edge of the tub. It was not because there wasn't enough. It was never that there wasn't enough. And you were never the problem. You were only the one small enough and loyal enough to be handed the weight. You are allowed to set it down. You are allowed to build a table of your own and make the thing you were never given a taste of and eat until you are full. There is room. There was always room. It only took me 31 years to build a table that believed it, and if you are still carrying your chair, I hope with everything in me that you build yours sooner than I built mine. Before you go, do something for me. In the comments, tell me where you were the first time you understood you were the one being sent to the garage, how old you were, what your chair looked like. Not the strong version. The true one. I read them. I read every single one late after my own house has gone to sleep, because not one of us should ever have to sit in that cold alone again. And if this felt less like a story and more like a memory, subscribe and stay with me. I'll keep telling the ones no one in your family ever would. Pull up a chair. There's room here. There's always room.